All right, so this link is on this first slide, but also in the chat, and this is a pre-survey that I would like everybody to do to give us an idea of what you know about Hyperdocs. All right, I did want us to just talk a little bit about Zoom. Now, keep in mind, I am talking about on a computer, so you may be looking at something a little different. And I'm going to take a cue from Robert, suggested that I stop my video while I'm presenting since you're not looking at my face. So when it comes to Zoom, the first thing is using the mute and the video buttons. And it might help if you're having internet drag or anything to mute your video as well. If I go full screen like this and you don't see the chat, you may have to look around and find the chat. Maybe up here at the top under the 3 dots or somewhere else where you can click and see the participants and see the chat. Thumbs up and applause. We do have some reaction opportunities there. That'll help us know if you do have a question or you like something. Feel free to try those out. And if you click on that participants box, you can also see some other reactions down here at the bottom. That just helps us know that you're with us. And when I go full screen, you may have to adjust your view. So these things may not be as obvious when I am full screen. All right, I'm hoping that we've given people some time to look at the pre-survey. I tried something a little different, and this might get a little messy, but just if you could see my house, you would know that's norm for me. But I have these links down here at the bottom throughout the presentation. So you can't click them while I'm presenting there, but you can look at them if you needed to access them again, and they're also going to be in the chat. All right, so we have 45 responses so far. That's pretty good. We're kind of at the halfway point. Keep going in there and putting in your information. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So this kind of gives us an idea of who we have in the room. And we have a variety of folks. We have even some high school people. Those are my people. I taught high school English for 13 years. So we've got a hodgepodge all over the place of people in different areas. I asked this question because Hyperdocs is not really platform specific. So although today I'm going to be showing you a couple of examples in the Google tools, you can do this very easily in Microsoft tools as well. So I see here that we have over 50% that are probably Google districts. And then some of you just have a preference. So this is a really interesting question. Do you have experience or do you not have experience using Hyperdocs, creating Hyperdocs, searching for and editing a Hyperdoc? We have most of our people that are kind of going, not really sure what this is, don't know what to do with it, but you made it here. So I'm guessing that you're very interested to find out how to create a Hyperdoc. And then our webinar slides are here for you to review the presentation. All right, so when it comes to Hyperdocs, mainly it is a term that came about when these 3 teachers wrote a book, and they called it the Hyperdoc Handbook in 2016. So this is not a new concept, but it's really evolved and just kind of exploded. I did put a definition up here. It's where all components of a learning cycle have been pulled together into one central hub. And I think that's what is appealing, is that not only in a blended classroom where you have access to some technology, is this a good thing, but it's also great for students' self-paced opportunities, especially while we're doing remote learning. I think this is a great option. All right, so who remembers the web quest? I remember the good old web quest. I assigned a few of those web quests. So I like to call a Hyperdoc kind of a web quest on steroids. It's bigger, it's better. It's a little more focused on strategic teaching. And it's not just taking your worksheets and digitizing it. And so I have a link here, and all these links are available to you. Some instructions kind of on how to create a Hyperdoc lesson. And that's any good lesson planning. You're going to start with the objectives, but then you're going to be looking at some of these other areas like the cycle of learning, the package, the workflow, all of those things. So I would just recommend that you look at that as you're planning. So first decide your objectives or your essential question. Why are students doing this? Which is what you do all the time when you create lessons. Decide your learning cycle. We're going to look at a couple of learning cycle options. And then determine the package and the engagement or assessment tools. Now, I want you to remember it's not about the amount of technology tools you pack into a Hyperdoc. It really is about the instruction and the learning cycle for the student, and the technology itself will just support what you're doing in that instruction. So here is an example, this little light bulb. You would start at the engage, and then the student would explore, and then there would be an opportunity for explanation. Now, if you were in a classroom, a blended learning opportunity, this might be a whole class situation where a teacher would explain something, or you could easily put explainer videos and things there to help the student along. Then they're going to have an opportunity to apply their learning. Sounds a little bit like the I do, we do, you do. So see the strategy going here. Then an opportunity to share. We always want students to be able to share or publish their work. And then a reflection piece. And notice that the Ditch That Textbook crew has kind of adapted it and said you could, for remote learning, package it with Explore, Explain, Apply. And so you're going to see lots of examples of this learning cycle and how people are adapting it. But the biggest thing is it allows for some student creativity and voice. All right, so here are some examples of Hyperdocs. That's really the best way before we start the creation process, is look at some examples. And I have some examples that are created in Google Docs, and then some that are created in slides. This could easily be done in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. And out to the side, I have the learning cycle. So this first one is an explain, explore, apply learning cycle. Just going to click on that. Now notice when I click on it, it opens up in my Google account. I'm already signed in. And as you go through, you can see how this is packaged. The explore part, it's very visual to students. On this particular one, they have made boxes for a student to type into. You don't have to do that. You can link the student out to something else, like a note-taking document. Or in a blended situation, they could physically write on some paper for this. Ideally, we want it to be as much digital as possible. And here they have some links for this student to explore. So they can listen, they can read, they can watch. So look at all that engagement, and then some follow-up questions. Explain. This is where they have another opportunity to read or listen. Explain what's a tall tale. And now the apply portion. What is fact? What is made up? What can I really believe? And so they're giving them instructions. You're going to go in here, you're going to save and close this Google drawing when you're done. And so lots of opportunity to engage students. Now I'm trying to move there we go, move that out of the way. So I can close some tabs. Another one, introduction to biomes, and you'll notice that this has lots of different learning cycle opportunities. They call this first one Discover, and so there's a link to some videos, even Google Expeditions. There's a Learn opportunity, and they have a website for students to go to. Explore, they have a thing link. They have a Wonder section with a Padlet where the students would go in and add their information, and then an extension where they have a chart. So all of these learning cycles, I did want to show you the difference in the document one, which is typically, I've seen them 1 page up to 5 pages. The Google Slides ones can be a little more graphic. And here's what's so interesting with this one, and I'm just going to put it in present mode. This one is tornadoes. Notice they have explore, explain, apply. Each of these has a link out to another document or another slide. And so that's the unique thing, is that you can link these to other documents or slides. And then this one has some teacher notes at the bottom. And here's another one. Notice all of these steps in the learning cycle. I like this one. It's a professional development one. And as you go through, each of these steps has a link. And this person has even got some notes down here about how long it would take for the teachers to explore these different resources. So I just think it's super creative how people are using Hyperdocs. And so this, I put this little GIF or GIF, however you want to say it, in here because if you're old like me, you might remember this 1988 Rice Krispies commercial. And I love it because I'm not a cook, but I could always make Rice Krispie treats. It's literally 3 ingredients. And so I love this commercial because she throws flour in her face and acts like she's got sweat, and she walks out like she's been working hard and she's really been reading her romance novel. Hyperdocs are not hard. And it's only hard if you don't know the cheat. So we're going to look at the cheater's way to creating Hyperdocs, and we're going to remix some Hyperdocs for your lesson. And this honestly is what has made Hyperdocs so popular. For those of you that use some tools like Kahoot, you don't love Kahoot because you can go in there and create 20 of your own individual questions. Most people love Kahoot because they can go to Kahoot's gallery and search through thousands of pre-made quizzes that you can adapt and use for your students. So think about Hyperdoc like this. This is this major gallery full of Hyperdocs at your disposal to remix. So I put a mark at the top says come back to this slide. When you go back through these resources, this slide is going to be very important to you, because the first thing I would advise you to do when you are ready to create a Hyperdoc is go to the Hyperdocs Academy website. Now, I pulled it up a second ago because I had the link on another site. This has just been revamped literally within the last week. So this is kind of exciting. You may get to some broken links that start with hyperdocs.co. It's because the writers of the Hyperdocs book, which came out in 2016, had this site and they continued loading it. They have revamped it and they're calling it Hyperdocs Academy now. It is super powerful, but they do request that you create an account. It's totally free, and that's the beauty of it. They have templates and samples for you to find. And I actually went through the remote teaching course yesterday. Really great. Very heavy on strategy and the learning cycle. So I recommend that you go through and check this out. It's super. And they are really kind of the creators of this idea of Hyperdocs. Next, if you're a Facebook person, there is a Hyperdocs Facebook group. The beauty of this Facebook group is people are always going in there and saying, hey, does anybody have a 9th grade Hyperdoc on the book, The Outsiders? And if you teach that book, you want to put your name in there and follow that post, because you'll be blown away with how many people will share their Hyperdocs in that Facebook group. You can search Pinterest for Hyperdocs boards. Just know that is a rabbit hole you may not get out of. And then I've got for you 3 basic Hyperdocs templates, 2 of them in docs and 1 in slides. All of these can also be used in Word or PowerPoint, or you can remix one that you like. All right, so I'm gonna take a minute just to sort of check in with everybody because I tend to be fast paced and ignore everything in the world. Any of my TIM specialists want to chime in and tell me what's been going on in the chat? Are there any questions or anything I need to know about?
Getting some positive reactions to these awesome templates. I see some of that going on.
Yay, I love that. Well, I'm telling you, I would love to say that these ideas are my ideas and that I came up with all of them. I totally love the fact that people are willing to share. And actually, hyperdocs.co used to have a dedicated site called Teachers Give Teachers. And if you are used to the whole teachers pay teachers movement, get off of that train because people love giving and sharing Hyperdocs. And that's the beautiful thing. You may have gone in and bought some things that are actually Hyperdocs. And I think you're going to realize that you can save a little cash and create your own, or even better, remix your own. All right, so I'm going to get back in here and move on. So what do I mean by remix? So what I mean by remix is you are going to find a template, and then you're going to make sure you're signed into your Google account, and you're going to choose make a copy if you want to use this in your Google account. If you're a Microsoft person, you can easily choose download and download this as a Word document and edit it in Word. So that's the beauty of it, is that you can go in and do this. Big no-no, do not request edit access. Typically, people are either going to have you forced to make a copy before you even view it, or it's going to be a view only template. Do not, I repeat, do not request edit access. People are sharing these things, and the last thing that they want is for 20 people to request edit access. Because if you know anything about Google Docs, you're not really wanting to edit their copy. You want your own copy. So I'm just going to show you what I mean by this process. So here's an example of one. This one is super cute. I love it, and I would totally use this in my English class. It's called My Superhero. And this person even puts you a link to the original blank template that they started with. So let's say that I want to use this one because I think this would be great for my English class. Do not request edit access. I'm going to go over here to File, and I'm going to choose Make a Copy. I can also choose Download, and look at that, boom, Microsoft Word. So I'm going to say Make a Copy. Now, pay close attention to the folder that you put it in. The folder may still be that person's folder, and essentially you're just kind of making a shortcut to it. So be sure in folder that you choose what folder you want it to go into. And if you want to rename it, you can rename it. I like that this person put their name in the title of the document so that I know who to give credit to. And I click OK. Now look at the difference in this page versus this page. I don't have all of those options. I'm going to close that one that I do now, because now I can edit. So now I can go in here and I can click and say, hey, this video is not a video I want to use. I want to use a different video. So all I can do is I can go in there, I can delete that, and I can put my own. So that is one of the coolest things about these Hyperdocs, is you can remix the Hyperdoc. So these are the steps to remixing, just as a recap. Make a copy, rename it as needed, change the share settings. So when you're ready to share this, you're going to need to make sure you're sharing it correctly. Check all of the links. So don't just grab it and go, this is great, I'm going to do this next period. Just like you wouldn't show a video you hadn't previewed to your class, don't just toss out a Hyperdoc not knowing that all the links work and that they're appropriate for the age of your students. Step 3, revise and edit to fit the needs of your students. Check the wording. I mean, I have some friends who've used Teachers Pay Teachers and they've received some things in PDF that had typos. You don't want to send things out with mistakes, so check it. Consider workflow changes. You know, if we're doing this for remote learning, how does this change? If I'm doing this in my classroom, are there opportunities for collaboration? Should students use something like an actual notebook, or should they use a digital tool? And then step 4, give credit to the original author and add your own name. So I think that's a great tip there. So no matter what tool you use, the basics that you need to understand when it comes to Hyperdocs is you need to be able to do at least these 4 things. If you're starting from scratch, you'll need to know a lot more about doing this. But I'm just going to show you, and I have a link here to my not so awesome Hyperdocs, so don't laugh. This would be if I was starting from scratch. So instead of remixing, I've decided to be that crazy teacher, and I'm going to do this from scratch. And I'm in Docs, and I noticed that the superhero one over here had gray background, or that was really cool. So I want to do that. And the way you do that is you can go up here to File. You may not have realized that way down here in Page Setup, you can change the color of your page. And I know that may not be much to you, but for students, sometimes just seeing a different background color, it helps engage them. Now, when it comes to my title, what do I want to do with my title? And I mean, you guys have been using technology a long time. You know, you can go up here, you can use bold, you can center it, depending on where your tools are. Sorry. And I can't, here's my 3 dots to get to my center, sorry. And then I can use fonts. Now, let's say that I want a super fancy font. You may not realize that if you go to more fonts, you really have access to a ton of fonts. If you know the name of it, you can look it up. But here, I could find a font that is not listed, and I can add it. So maybe this one. And so I have a new font. So I can go really fancy with that. I can insert an image. This is a basic step in Docs as well as in Word. I'm going to go to Insert. Now, the beauty with Google Docs is you have lots of opportunities to insert an image. It can be one that you have already, but one of my favorite things to do in Google Docs is to search the web. So I am going to look for a computer disk, because most of my students wouldn't know what a computer disk looks like. There it is, the old floppy disk. Okay, so I can double click that, or I can do insert image, and woo, it's a whopper. And so all I have to do is grab those corners and make it smaller. And I have an image now. And you may have not known this, but you do have some options down here with these tools. You can, if you choose wrap text, you can freeform move your picture around. It gives you a little bit more freedom, and that's the wrap text option. And so I can just continue on, and I decide with the engage part, I want to search for a video. So how do I insert a video? That same insert command. I can insert a hyperlink. Sorry, not that command. I want to insert a hyperlink. So I'm going to say video. And when I select that, I can right click it and choose link. And it is going to ask me, what link do I want? Now, I can link it to other Google documents. And if I say technology integration, this is Google. So Google will actually search for some links that go with technology integration. Or I can choose find more. And that is going to open up the Explore tab. And I can put in technology integration, technology integration video. And now I have some other links. So there's one from YouTube. Can check it out, see if I like it. If this is the video I want to use, then I have some options down here to grab that link and put it right here. So I would right click and choose link and add that video. Now notice I could have just pasted the link like these links are pasted down here, but it looks so much better if I actually hyperlink a word. I can also hyperlink pictures in that same format. Right click and scroll down to link. Actually got my screen a little bit too large to see that. So I can insert links on pictures, I can insert links on words, and then I can also go down here and I can add a table with that same insert table. You decide how many rows and columns that you want. Once you choose that, then you have it down here and you can paste each of these items into the table. Another thing that you can do is that you have some table formatting options. Under table properties, just by right clicking on that table, and I can change that cell background color. And all of those steps, if you want to get super creative, are the steps that are used to create this look. Shapes, tables, increasing the size of the font, all of that gives you that look that you want when it comes to a Hyperdoc. If you're in slides, you have the same kinds of opportunities. You create, insert a link, a video, an image, all of these things into a slides deck. Any object can be selected and you can use this paint bucket tool to fill it with color. Well, like I said, I really prefer to remix a template because I don't have all that time to create one from scratch. Okay, so I love some of these templates, and I do want to take just a minute and go back to the slide that I said, go to this slide. And look at one of these basic templates. This one is tried and true. You're going to see it on a lot of websites. And here you have got your tool to add a lesson title. You've got the nice colorful boxes. Notice that they have left a spot for a picture or a video link that you want to put there. And so I would do File, make a copy. I have a folder called Hyperdocs, so I'm going to leave it there. Now, those same tips we talked about inserting a link would be perfect for here. So I would decide what it is I'm teaching my students. Maybe we are looking at The Outsiders. I would put my instructions here. And then I would decide what is going to be used for engage. And I like this as insert a video, an image, a quote, an inspirational hook in this box. And so this is when I would go, okay, I'm going to insert a video. And I would decide what video, you know, I'm going to say, watch this. Watch this video. And then I am going to either right click, or I can choose the 3 dots, and the hyperlink is the option I want. And so if I have a video already here, or if I have a video saved in Drive, it will access it. Or I can look for one here, YouTube The Outsiders. There's the official movie trailer for The Outsiders just by typing it in that box. And so I could say, watch this video and tell me what about the trailer you like. And what does it make you think about? Maybe this is when we're going to start this unit. And so I can add that. So all throughout this, it gives me ideas on how to go in and add my information. All right, so I'm going to move on to the slide that talked about these templates. Now, these templates are a little more advanced with that explanation of each step of the process. Let me back it up. There we go. So I love this template because it's the explore, explain, apply. It says insert your own image, and this is cool. They have even linked you to a Padlet filled with copyright-free image websites. Boom. I love when people share stuff. So we've got insert your own image, and they give you a link to what images you might use. Under Explore, they have links again to images, videos, a Padlet filled with possible video websites, article like Newsella. If you've never used Newsella, that's a really cool tool. Other possible resources. And notice that this particular template has it separated. Here is what I'm assigning. Here are your instructions or expectations for the student. And you might actually put a box for the student to type into, or link them to a form, a Padlet, or a Google Doc. Go down further, you see the same thing with their explain, apply and share, and then some optional like connecting and extending your task. And then this next one is one of my favorites. If you are one of these folks that says, hey, I'm not sure what tool I should use for each of these steps. This will blow your mind. If you're in the engage step, here are some possible tools you could use to engage your students. I don't want this to overwhelm you. I do want it to inspire ideas for what you can do to engage your students. Explore, they give you some options. Explain, this would be the direct instruction part where you would give students information. Apply, this is the student creativity piece where they create based on what they've learned. And then they have some more here with sharing, reflecting, and extending. Now these slides are some other slides that I think are really cool. And what they've done is they have taken that part of the learning cycle like engage. They've said, okay, let's just look at one tool. So I say this all the time, and I think some of my HM specialists would agree, that when I teach teachers workshops during the year, and I see some of those we call repeat offenders, those people that come to our sessions and multiple times, you don't want to overwhelm people. So I always say, if you just take one thing and maybe get really good at that one thing, and then try something else. So I think these are great examples. Let's say I want to really utilize YouTube. They have the tool. They have an example Hyperdoc that uses YouTube videos. And if you have that Hyperdoc book, they even reference what page they got this idea from. And so, look, memes. I mean, kids love memes. Throw those in there. They will think you're cool, or they'll just make fun of you, and because that's what they do with old people. But still, you feel hip if you're using memes. Explore. You can curate a collection of resources, and there's some options for that, and some example Hyperdocs for that. I'm a big Google Maps fan, and a lot of people package their entire Hyperdoc in Google Maps. Who knew? Explain. This is where you can really load in some content for your students in a way that doesn't feel like they are just soaking in content, where they are a little more engaged. And apply. This is where they can be creative, and some ideas of some tools that you could use there. And then share, ways for them to publish and share their work with others. And then a reflection tool, and that's the one I tend to forget. And so these are some great ideas for reflection. The last one is extend. So this is where you might have some games, blog, graphic that they could create as well. As I said, let's do questions. I do want to show you that on slide 25, I have a link to my Pinterest board. And that Pinterest board is really full of curated resources, Hyperdocs. I have a Google Drive folder in here of things I've been collecting over the years that are Hyperdocs resources. So you could search through there and find something that you're looking for, or you can use one of the other sites I recommended. So, so let me hear your thoughts on Hyperdocs and what questions you might have. Or Tim Specialist, jump in if you saw something in the chat that we need to address.
Hey, Brandy, while they are getting their thoughts together, I'll just tell you that there's been several comments about these are great resources, love this, talking about the engagement, a lot of information here. And then there've been a lot of questions about other things that they can integrate into this, like vocabulary. So there's been a lot of great comments.
Yeah, the one thing I would say that I hope you can take from this is that Hyperdocs is the package, and that's what you should consider this to be, how you would package your content and then share it with students. It works perfectly with Google Classroom. It works great even with Remind, because it's a document or a slide deck you can shoot out to your students, and everything is there.
Hey, Brandy, we do have one question from Jacob Hicks. What are the pros and cons of using Google Sites as a form of a Hyperdoc?
I don't know that I would say that there are any cons, other than, in my opinion, Sites takes a little more time to build than docs or slides. I would say if you're first starting out, it might be simpler for people to do something in a Word document or a Google Docs, if that's what they're used to using. Slides is kind of my jam because I do so many of my presentations with it. So I'm pretty comfortable adding things to that. Sites is great, just like the other packaging possibilities, because it allows you to just drag and drop and add your information in there. But then it's just going to be, how are you going to send it to students and how are they going to access it? So when it comes to, for example, Google Docs, I could download it as a PDF and send it to my students. So there's several ways to access that. That's the only con, I guess I can think. But Google Sites is also used, like I said, Google Sites, Google Maps. Doesn't have to be a Google product, but a lot of people are using it with Google. All of the links that we want to make sure that you've covered today. I had lots of people do the pre-survey and the roster. We do have an attendance report from today's Zoom meeting. You definitely want to access the slides. If you didn't get a chance to screenshot or write this down, you will be able to find it on the atm.us webinars link. And then the PowerSchool PD link. This is just a direct link to this section within PowerSchool PD. And we did have some questions the other day about logging into PowerSchool and getting a certificate. On our atm.us website, we also have a PowerSchool page. And that page has some step-by-step on how to log into PowerSchool PD and also how to get a paper certificate if you need that. Now, also have at the bottom here a link to tomorrow's Talk and Tea. It's just kind of a collaboration Q&A meeting. We'll have a few questions to kind of drive the conversation, but it might be a good time for you to ask some specific questions and pick the brains of some of our ATIM specialists.